Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, Refuse to use tongs. Allow us to get you your roles for you. Okay, this happened about 20 years ago when I was 17 and working in a major UK supermarket in a rather affluent London suburb. This was my first proper weekend job. I used to work in the bakery, and it was the best section to work in a supermarket. My job was to make sure that bread and fresh cakes were well stocked and presented and test the odd donut for quality control purposes, so that we can make sure there were fresh items available before we ran out, slicing fresh bread, and making sure rolls were stocked and tongs were available. One busy Saturday, I was doing a quick inventory count, and when I came to the individual rolls, I saw a middle-aged lady, in a large, furry coat and luscious, red fingernails. I didn't pay much attention to her, until I saw her with a crusty roll in her manicured and bejeweled hand, give it a squeeze, poke her thumb through the crust, and throw it back in the basket. She did it again, and when she reached in to try a third one, I piped up, "Excuse me, ma'am, would you mind using the tongs provided, please?" She ignored me and grabbed a third roll and broke the crust, so, a little louder, I said, "Ma'am, please use the tongs provided." She heard me that time and glared at me and said, "I beg your pardon? Ma'am, please don't grab the rolls. Please use the tongs in the basket. Are you saying that my hands are dirty?" She then raised her voice while waving her embellished hand at me, wiggling her fingers so they sparkled as they moved. "Are you suggesting that this is filthy?" Well, knowing that folks tend not to wash their hands before using trolleys and baskets, without blinking or thinking, I said, "Yes, they are. Please use the tongs." The inevitable happened. "I want to speak to your manager at once. You should learn to respect your elders and betters. I'll have your job for this insolence." So, I called for the bakery manager to come on down, bearing in mind, this was a busy Saturday. He was in his whites and wanted to know what the problem was. The woman went into a sob story about how she was testing the rolls for freshness, and I was so rude to her, telling her how her hands were filthy, a few crocodile tears here and there, how she had never been so insulted. In a stern voice, my manager turned to me and said, "Did you say this to her?" Now, I was starting to think I did something wrong, and a bit nervous, I replied, "Yes, I asked her to use the tongs." She ignored me, so I asked her again. "Okay." My manager turned to the woman, said that he will be back shortly, and said he needed to do something and get some paperwork. While my manager was out of earshot, the woman crowed, "See what happens when you don't know your place. I said I could have your job for this." My manager did a quick count of the rolls, muttered 224 loudly, and went into the back room, and he then emerged with an industrial-sized black bin liner. He then proceeded to empty 8 large baskets of rolls into the bin liner, and a label for 224 individual granary rolls, tied up the bag, handed it to her, and said, "Here you are, madam, they're all yours." "I beg your pardon?" "The rolls, madam, they're all yours. You openly admitted to contaminating our stock, and you ignored a member of staff when she asked you repeatedly to use the tongs. You've wasted my time, so you are paying for the stock you have damaged. Good day. What am I supposed to do with all of these bloody rolls? I only wanted 2. With a dazzling customer service smile, my manager chirped, "Not my concern, madam. Security will escort you to the register and make sure they are paid for. Enjoy your weekend." He then turned on his heels and went back upstairs to the bakery. The woman looked at me, then the huge bag, absolutely aghast, so I did the only thing I could do, grab a random loaf of bread, take it to the bread slicer, and laugh in the back room. I saw her almost every week afterward, always using the tongs. We wouldn't get away with that now, but he was easily my favorite manager in all of my years of working. The next one is titled, Realtor Refuses to Do His Job, so we get him to cancel the contract on his own. What a loon. My better half and I are in the market for a home. We've been casually searching for 4 years, and this year we really kicked it into gear. We nailed down where we wanted to live, our price range, got approved, and actually found a house we wanted to put an offer on. We contacted an agent my husband found and said he thought he wanted to work with due to the guy's other interests and the niche he'd built himself in that area, right up our alley. Against my better judgment, we signed with the guy as our buyer's agent. I'll call him Agent Douche for the purposes of this story. So, Agent Douche was our exclusive buyer's agent. I personally thought he was a yes man, but my husband didn't see it. He knew we would be buying sight unseen, cannot be helped, yes, it's unwise. He went to this property and had only glowing reviews. We asked if he saw any signs of water damage, husband has mold sickness, have to be careful, and he emphatically said there was none whatsoever. It was pristine. He kept telling us how amazing it was, how it wouldn't last, and how we'd better offer a decent chunk over asking if we want to have a chance at it. We did not feel that was a good idea. Against his advice, we offered below asking, and it was readily accepted. The first red flag for me was the agent forcefully urging me to offer above asking with no other offers on the table. So, we get the inspection, a guy Agent Douche recommended personally and ended up paying twice what it should have cost, $875. I'll give the inspector credit though, that the report was exceedingly thorough, and we got it back within a day. A cursory glance at the inspection report, though, showed a large area of the wood floor under a window in the living room, in plain sight to Agent Douche, was black from water seeping in. The guy says he's got 15 years of experience, he should have seen that. But he isn't an inspector, and that's not necessarily his job. But still, another sign he's playing yes man to get us to buy anything at the highest cost. Anyhow, we immediately back out of that deal and tell him why. He asks, "Are you mad at me?" I was taken aback by this question coming from a grown man who says he's an ex-Marine, but whatever. I tell him it's fine and that we must move on to another property. He seems quite upset by this but agrees. I get an email from the inspector 2 days later saying that he's gotten an email from the seller of that home asking for another copy of our inspection and that he will not send it to them without our consent as we own it. I immediately ask Agent Douche if he sent our inspection to the seller after we backed out, and he says he did and says, "I'm sorry, I should have asked." I tell the inspector that we do not want our inspection shared without our consent and that if the man wants another inspection, the seller was loaded, he can pay for his own. Over the next few weeks, Agent Douche sends us a handful of properties we had already excluded as out of our price range. Let me say, our price range is pretty high. If I can't find a home for under $500,000, I don't want one. I repeatedly tell him these are too expensive. There are homes within our range. Eventually, he relents and sends one or two within our range. He's still not sending us anything that fits our criteria, though, like not even a little, and we're actually doing all the legwork. I keep sending him homes we've found online. He comes up with one excuse or another as to why it won't work, but I tell him I want to see information on it. He's definitely irritated at this point but sends me bits and pieces of information over the course of days. After pulling out of the offer on the first home, Agent Douche has become increasingly difficult to reach. He's told my husband he's so busy that he must start turning people away. It becomes a running joke in our house. "Have you heard from Agent Douche about that house we sent him?" Haha, yeah right. Homes hitting the market at this point were going under contract within 24 hours due to low supply. So, him taking 2, 3, 4 days to get us basic information like whether or not there's an HOA or what it uses for heat, are a detriment. He repeatedly urges us to make offers above asking on homes he hasn't even pulled info on, let alone set foot in. He says this is necessary because things are moving so quickly. I'm too uncomfortable to do this. He's playing around with $5,000 in earnest money, and just no. I realized pretty quickly that he took us as clients only because we'd found the home already, and he thought it would be quick money for him. Can't say I blame him on that, but when it became clear that it was not the right property, if he did not have time for us, he should have sent us on our way. We tell him we're feeling neglected, and it's taking too long to get answers on basic questions. He keeps saying, "It's no big deal," like that somehow makes me feel better about not buying a home because he's too busy for us. We ask him if there is someone else at his brokerage we can work with who has time, but he owns it, so there's not. We send him another home, and he actually went out and took a few 15-second videos there. We ended up making an offer. Again, he urges us to offer well over asking. I tell him that's not happening and offer $30,000 under. The sellers counted at 25 under, and this is accepted by us. 2 days into contract, I have to ask him if we are actually under contract. No contact from him one way or another, so no idea. He eventually responds and says we are. Okay, great. 4 days into our 10-day inspection period, and we still haven't heard word one from him. I finally ask him if we're planning to schedule any inspections. He says, I'll connect with you tonight, and then doesn't. The next day, 5 days into this inspection period, I tell him we'd like to cancel the contract and cancel our contract with him again. The mold test we need will take 5 to 7 days, so we literally can't get it inspected in the time left. He immediately calls me, and it does not go well. I tell him we're unhappy, he calls me unreasonable, again says, it's no big deal, blah blah blah, but he begs for another chance. Literally he begged me. So, fine, whatever. One more chance. We find the perfect property and immediately email it to him. He says he's set an appointment to view it the next morning. 2 days later, he finally sends us a totally different, much more expensive property. I tell him my husband has left to go there already and may choose to see it when he's there, but that we are really interested in the other one we sent him and ask if he ever makes it out to see it. He responds with, you should make an offer on this one as soon as possible. Like, what the duck, dude? So, again, I ask him point blank, did you go see the other home at XYZ or not, and he finally admits he didn't bother going to see it. And now, since it's been 2 more days, there's an accepted offer. He will not go see it, so we might put a backup offer in. The next day, I receive videos of the more expensive property that I never asked for nor wanted. My husband then arrives, having 30 hours to go to this area to look at the area and some properties and meet Agent Douche. Husband texts updates on his trip to Agent Douche along the way but never gets a response. I speak to Agent Douche the night before, telling him my husband will be there in the morning. I tell him to please call and coordinate with him, that he's available now to speak. He told me he would when we ended our call, but didn't. The next day, my husband arrives. He texts to say he's arrived and Agent Douche has no response. He waits and waits but still nothing. Tries to call, no response. After another 7-ish hour, it's now dark, and our agent has ghosted him all day. Husband texts him to say we want out, that he's driven all the way here, and been ghosted. Agent Douche flips his crap. Like instantly. He says he didn't ghost anyone and that we never told him what day he was arriving or that he got there, obvious and provable lies, and he figured he'd want to rest the whole first day. With 30 hours each way, and a full week took off work for this, losing income, we did not want that, which he would have known had he asked or coordinated at all. Things fully collapse at this point and become outright hostile. He says immediately that we are in a contract with him, and there's nothing we can do. We have to work with him, or we can agree to pay him 3% or get a new agent to agree to pay him a referral fee. These are the only terms I'll agree to. It's your best option. You should take it. I think this would be reasonable if our reason for cancellation were not his own negligence. I tell him there is no way in hell I will allow him to profit for ducking us around. He literally laughs at me and says I have no choice. Bad idea. I have an attorney look over the contract, and yes, we're ducked contractually. Funnily enough, the attorney tells me he is very aware of this guy, and he does this all the time. He apologizes that we're in this mess but says there's nothing he can do about it. I ask him about posting reviews of our experience, that I'm worried about a defamation suit. He says that as long as it's true, and I have proof, I cannot be sued for defamation. I call the Real Estate Commission and speak with an investigator for the entire state. He asks where in the state this occurred, and I tell him. He says, is it Agent Douche, and my jaw dropped. He says he gets a lot of calls about this guy, that there are lots of problems, but that he hides behind pretty ironclad contracts, so he continues to do this legally. He's been doing it for years, apparently. He tells us that if we try to circumvent the contract, we will almost certainly be sued by this man. He's done it before. I tell Agent Douche that the least he could do if he doesn't have time to do his job, is release us. Again, he laughs. I tell him I will report these actions to the Real Estate Commission. Ha ha, is his response. I tell him fine, then he can expect people to hear about what's happened to us online. He says, I will sue you. I tell him that I will only be posting a true account of events, with written proof, and therefore, it is not libelous, and he can sue me but will not win. He replies, "You two are psychopaths." Now I really start to get angry. I emailed Agent Douche and told him point blank that if his terms for cancellation were not acceptable to me and mine were not acceptable to him, then we are still legally bound. As such, I fully expect him to do his job. I sent a list of houses we would never otherwise consider. He did nothing for 2 days, and for 2 days, I asked him probably 10 times a day to send me documentation on them. He asked if I even meant to send those to him, and I said, "Of course, you're my agent, are you not?" He sweetly replies that he is and that he'll send the information that evening. I send him like 8 more listings, all in a different geographical area. The contract was for the entire state, and all well below our price limit. Like, some were under $100,000, and all were really rough. That evening, Agent Douche starts to try to team up with my husband against me. For some reason, he thinks this tactic will work because my husband avoids confrontation whenever possible. He emails my husband. He forwards the listings I've sent and asks my husband if I am mentally unstable and says he thinks he should get me some help. It does not go well, and my husband tells him to pump his brakes and that he has no right to talk about me that way. Agent Douche doesn't respond. Instead, he writes me, telling me he thinks I'm unstable. His logic is that I'm not happy with him and don't want to work with him, and now I'm sending him properties, so I must be mentally incompetent. I tell him again that we have 4 months left on our contract, and I am under no obligation to accept his terms for cancellation if they do not benefit me, just like he is not obligated to accept mine. He emails my husband again, saying that he's got some agents who will be really nice to Mizzle, and my husband just says, "We don't need your referrals, dude." Next day, another agent calls me. Agent Douche wants me to sign with them instead, and they've already agreed to accept less commission, so he will be paid. I have a lovely chat with the nice couple on the phone and then tell them flatly that under no circumstances will I allow him to profit financially for doing this to us. He's become openly hostile, rude, and calls us names. They didn't really know what to say, so we amicably ended the call. They call me back a bit later, I suppose after talking to Agent Douche, and ask again if I'll consider signing with them just to be done with the situation, that buyers don't even pay the commission, and that they will even pay for my inspection. Wow. Once more I tell them no, that is not their responsibility, and I won't allow them to go out of pocket for this clown. I tell them in no uncertain terms that I would choose to wait out this contract before signing with anyone else and that I might consider signing with them. I never would because of their affiliation with him, but only if we were released fully from the contract beforehand. I told them that if we somehow decided to purchase one of the 2 homes he showed us, that I would feel obligated to pay him, but short of that, there is no way. Agent Douche emails and texts more, calling me more names for refusing to sign his cancellation terms, even though he's done the same to me. I again send him a handful of crappy listings and very valid reasons I might want each property. He says nothing, and I ask him every 2 to 3 hours to send me documentation on them and that if he's still our agent, he's obligated to do something and that he cannot legally refuse to fulfill his contractual duties and still keep us in the contract. He must choose. At this point, I'm building a pretty solid paper trail of begging him to do what he is contractually obligated to do and evidence of his refusal. Agent Douche has started to realize that I am not going to go away. I keep sending him properties and keep at him to send me info, which he never does. Finally, mercifully, Agent Douche texts me that he is terminating us as clients and that we are free to work with whoever we want. 2 days later, he finally sends me the contract cancellation. We are elated and sign quickly as it all is in order. After, though, I take a very close look at his actual signature on the page. He signed the cancellation, duck off, instead of Agent Douche. Guy's a real class act. Luckily, our attorney said through his laughs, that the cancellation is still binding, and if he did try to take us to court, he'd obviously have to explain to a judge that he signed a legal document with an expletive. He assured us that we finally were done with him. The Real Estate Commission investigator had actually asked me to keep him updated on the outcome of the situation. So, after hearing back from the lawyer that we were indeed done, I called him back to tell him. I told him exactly what happened and that I just forced him to work with us until he realized he'd have 4 more months of me still not going away, so he cancelled. Mr. Nice Investigator could not stop laughing. He told me Agent Douche calls him regularly and uses him as a point of contact because none of the other investigators will speak to him. He tells me the guy has a few screws loose. I tell him I hope he will tell anyone else in our position what worked and to feel free to pass my info along if necessary. He readily accepts that offer, and we jovially end the call. In the end, I'm very glad I stood up to this a-hole, and I have zero regrets. We called his bluff, and I can pretty well bet that no one had done that to him before. He was absolutely used to bullying people into getting his way. The last one is titled, Crazy Lottery Lady Gets Mad That I Can't Cash Ticket. So for some backstory, I work at a small gas station that has been robbed a few times in the past, so we can only keep around $70 in our register at night. This lady knows this, and I have explained to her on many occasions that I can't cash any tickets worth more than $40, and that is iffy this late at night because it would leave me with hardly enough money to operate the store. Nor can I even scan them to check if they are winners because it won't let me cancel out anything under $100, so here is where my story begins. Lady buys her tickets, scratches off only the barcode and hands it back to me. Check. Me ma'am, I really am not sure I can scan that ticket without knowing how much it's worth. I don't keep much money up this late, which she already knows. Calais, you say that every night and I don't see why you can't cash it or cancel it out. Everybody else can, which is a lie about the cancellation aspect of it. It's a statewide system. They all work the same. Me, well, this is a much smaller store than some of the other ones and I can only keep so much up. Calais, well, you are going to scan it tonight and you are going to duck and cash it if it's a winner. Me, alright, scan it and it's a $60 winner. I can't cancel it out like I said and only had $50 in my drawer. So here comes the malicious compliance. Me, you won $60. Calais, good, I'll just take the money. Me, okay. Go stand over there. This may be a while. Calais, what do you mean a while? I want my money. Me, well, like I told you, I might not be able to cash it. I only have $50 in the register. I also need money to operate, so once I do maybe $35 in sales I can pay you out. After some huffing and puffing she went to the corner and waited. For roughly 45 minutes as it was late and kinda dead. I would like to say she probably learned something from this, but from past experiences with her she's learned nothing. If nothing else though, I got the satisfaction of watching her getting progressively more upset that she had to wait. And that's enough for me. Thanks for listening.